The autumn sky above Schweinfurt stretched endlessly in all directions on that October morning in 1943. At 24,000 feet, the air was thin and bitter cold. German pilot Hauptmann Heinz Knokers felt his gloved hands grip the control stick of his Messerschmitt Bf 109G6 fighter. His knuckles showed white through the leather. Through his armored windscreen, he witnessed something that chilled him to his core. The sight that greeted his eyes defied every tactical manual he had studied, every combat experience he had survived. The entire sky pulsed with American bombers. They filled the horizon from east to west, from north to south, a metallic river of destruction flowing toward the heartland of Germany. His diary entry that evening would capture the terror of that moment. The words came from a man who had faced death countless times before, yet never had he felt so small, so helpless, so utterly overwhelmed by the sheer scale of what approached. The sky is full of them. From horizon to horizon, nothing but bombers. We are insects attacking eagles. Those 291 Boeing B-17 Flying Fortresses moved through the October air in perfect combat box formations. Their altitude stacked precisely between 23,000 and 27,000 feet. Each formation flew with mechanical precision. No wavering, no gaps, no signs of the chaos that combat usually brought. Morning sunlight struck their aluminum skin like hammered silver. The reflection created a dazzling display that hurt to look at directly. Each massive bomber bristled with 1350 caliber machine guns. Their barrels pointed in all directions, like the spines of enormous metal porcupines. Together, these weapons could create a wall of lead that transformed the sky itself into a corridor of death. But the numbers alone did not paralyze Knokers with dread. He had faced large formations before during 2 years of combat over Europe. What made his blood run cold was the terrible realization that had been growing in every Luftwaffe pilot's mind for months. A truth too horrible to speak aloud in the ready rooms and mess halls. These 291 bombers represented perhaps 1/3 of the American heavy bomber force stationed in England. Just 1/3. Yesterday his squadron had participated in shooting down 60 American bombers in the first Schweinfurt raid. The Luftwaffe had called it their greatest single-day victory of the entire war. German radio had proclaimed it proof of the Reich's invincible defenses. Yet here they came again. More bombers than before, as if yesterday's losses meant absolutely nothing to them. As if 60 destroyed aircraft were merely a minor inconvenience, something to be shrugged off and replaced overnight. Behind Knokers, 300 German fighters gathered like a swarm of angry wasps. Messerschmitt Bf 109s formed the backbone of the force. Their engines snarled with mechanical fury. Focke-Wulf 190s added their own distinctive growl to the aerial symphony. Twin-engine Messerschmitt Bf 110s lumbered into position, despite their obvious disadvantage against single-seat fighters. Even obsolete Junkers Ju-87 Stuka dive bombers had been pressed into service as makeshift bomber destroyers. Their fixed landing gear and slow speed made them sitting ducks, but desperate times demanded desperate measures. This massive German force represented nearly every serviceable fighter aircraft within 400 kilometers. Every base had been stripped bare. Every reserve had been committed. What Knokers knew with crystal clarity was that this represented everything Germany could muster. There would be no second wave approaching from the east, no reserves waiting at distant airfields, no cavalry coming over the hill to save the day. Meanwhile, American intelligence reports confirmed what German pilots feared most. The United States was building 500 new bombers every single month. 500. The number seemed impossible to comprehend. The transformation of aerial warfare had begun 18 months earlier in January 1942. Few in the Luftwaffe leadership recognized its significance at the time. The first American heavy bombers to arrive in England seemed almost quaint. 7 B-17Es of the 97th Bombardment Group touched down on British soil like advance scouts of an approaching army. Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring laughed when his intelligence staff informed him of the American arrival. His response became legendary among those who heard it. American boys cannot fight. Their bombers are furniture vans that will fall apart under combat stress. The fat Reichsmarschall dismissed American industrial capacity with the wave of a jeweled hand. Major Johannes Steinhoff commanded JG-77 in North Africa during those early months. His memoirs would later describe Göring's dismissal of American air power as the most catastrophic intelligence failure of the entire war. Unlike his corpulent commander, Steinhoff had encountered American-built aircraft in British service. He found them remarkably robust, surprisingly well-designed, built to standards that impressed even German engineers. The Americans built aircraft like they built automobiles. Steinhoff observed this with growing concern. Interchangeable parts simplified maintenance. Standardized systems reduced training time. Production quantities that boggled the European mind. Where German factories crafted individual aircraft like precious works of art, American assembly lines stamped out bombers like tin cans. The first warning signs appeared on August 17, 1942. 18 B-17 bombers attacked the Rouen-Sotteville marshalling yards in France. The raid itself seemed insignificant, barely worth mentioning in intelligence summaries. But the details told a different story. Hauptmann Rudolf Pflanz led Tutu JG-2 during the interception. His specialized high-altitude squadron flew pressurized Bf-109G-1 fighters designed specifically for bomber interception. Pflanz died on July 31, 1943, but his after-action reports survived in Luftwaffe archives. They painted a disturbing picture of American bomber capabilities. The aircraft maintained formation despite severe damage. One B-17 returned to base with over 200 cannon holes punched through its airframe. Their defensive fire proved murderous and well-coordinated. Gunners tracked German fighters with mechanical precision. They led their targets properly. They fired in coordinated volleys that created overlapping fields of fire. But the production statistics should have terrified the German high command. Those 18 bombers represented less than 2 days' production from American factories. Less than 2 days. While Germany struggled to produce individual aircraft through painstaking craftsmanship, America was preparing to mass produce them like consumer goods. The entire German aircraft industry produced only 15,400 aircraft of all types during 1942. Fighters, bombers, transports, trainers, everything combined barely exceeded 15,000 units. Meanwhile, the Boeing Seattle plant alone was approaching a production rate that would reach 16 B-17s per day by mid-1944. 16 per day from a single factory. The October 14, 1943 mission would become known as Black Thursday to the Americans. They lost 60 bombers and 650 aircrew over the target. For the Luftwaffe, it represented simultaneously their greatest victory, and the moment many pilots realized the war was already lost. Oberleutnant Hans Phillips commanded IJG-1 that day. He shot down 2 B-17s during his attack run. His guns chewed through aluminum and steel with devastating effect. Engines caught fire. Wings folded. Men died in mechanical fury 25,000 feet above the earth. But defensive fire from a third bomber caught Phillips' aircraft. His wingman Feldwebel Stefan Litjens survived to report Phillips' final radio transmission. The words haunted every German pilot who heard them. These are not the same Americans we faced 6 months ago. Their gunnery is deadly accurate. They maintain formation under any punishment. Berlin tells us this is only the beginning. Phillips died moments after speaking those words. His fighter exploded in a ball of orange flame. Another irreplaceable veteran lost to American industrial might. The Luftwaffe claimed 60 bombers destroyed and 17 damaged, their highest single-day score of the entire war. Propaganda Minister Joseph Goebbels announced it as proof of Fortress Europe's impregnable defenses. German radio broadcasts proclaimed the destruction of American air power. Citizens cheered in the streets. But the pilots who pressed home their attacks through murderous defensive fire knew better. They had expended 90% of their ammunition achieving those kills. They lost 38 fighters destroyed and 30 damaged. 28 pilots died or suffered wounds. Nearly 25% of the attacking force became casualties. More terrifying was what happened next. Within 48 hours, American reconnaissance aircraft photographed the Schweinfurt factories. They assessed damage with mechanical precision, calculated repair times, identified critical bottlenecks, planned follow-up attacks. Within 1 week, 240 replacement B-17s arrived in England from America. Fresh crews climbed into the cockpits. New gunners manned the defensive positions. The American war machine simply absorbed the losses and continued grinding forward. Within 2 weeks, the 8th Air Force mounted another major raid, this time with 378 bombers. More aircraft than had participated in the entire Schweinfurt mission. The message was clear and terrifying. American losses were temporary inconveniences. German losses were permanent catastrophes. Major Wilhelm Ferdinand Galland commanded the 2 JG-26 during this period. Brother of the famous Adolf Galland, he possessed the same tactical brilliance and strategic insight. His diary entries from late 1943 revealed the psychological toll of fighting an unwinnable war. We are Sisyphus. Each bomber we destroy is replaced by 2. Each pilot we lose is replaced by boys with 20 hours in a fighter. The Americans lose aircrew and train thousands more. We lose pilots and scrape the bottom of the barrel. The winter of 1943 to 1944 brought temporary respite. Weather limited deep penetration raids during the darkest months. Snow and ice grounded bombers throughout December and January. German pilots caught their breath. Mechanics worked frantically to repair damaged aircraft. Training schools pushed inadequately prepared pilots through abbreviated courses. But winter also brought devastating intelligence reports. These documents circulated among senior Luftwaffe officers like harbingers of doom. They painted a picture of American industrial capacity that dwarfed anything Germany had imagined possible. The numbers seemed like fantasy, too large to comprehend, too terrifying to believe. The Ford Willow Run plant in Michigan had achieved something German industrial experts declared impossible: assembly line production of 4-engine heavy bombers. The facility covered 3.5 million square feet of factory floor space. It employed 42,000 workers who labored around the clock in 3 shifts. At peak production, in April 1944, the plant completed a B-24 Liberator every 63 minutes, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The assembly line never stopped moving. Workers bolted wings to fuselages with mechanical precision. Engines dropped into place like clockwork. Instruments and radios filled cockpits in predetermined sequences. This single plant would produce 16,972 complete aircraft plus knockdown kits for another 1893 bombers. A total contribution of 8865 aircraft from one factory complex. Germany's entire aircraft industry could not match the output of this single American facility. Oberstleutnant Josef Prieler commanded JG-26 as Geschwader Commodore during the dark winter months. He obtained a captured American technical manual in December 1943. The document described the new B-17G model appearing in increasing numbers over German targets. His report to Fighter Command betrayed barely controlled panic. The B-17G model has 13 machine guns, including a chin turret specifically designed to break up our frontal attacks. They have thought of everything. They have planned for everything. They can afford to plan for everything. The Boeing plants in Seattle and Wichita approached production rates of 363 B-17s monthly at peak capacity. Douglas plants in Long Beach and Oklahoma City added 400 B-24s to the monthly total. Consolidated facilities in San Diego and Fort Worth contributed another 300 heavy bombers. Martin in Baltimore manufactured 200 B-26 medium bombers. North American in Kansas City built 400 B-25s each month. Grumman on Long Island produced 447 fighters monthly from their assembly lines. Against this avalanche of American production, Germany's entire monthly output of single-engine fighters averaged 1,600 aircraft in late 1943. Actual deliveries fell below theoretical production due to bombing of manufacturing facilities, parts shortages, labor problems, fuel restrictions. February 20-25, 1944 brought Operation Argument. History would remember it as Big Week. The code name seemed almost casual for an operation that demonstrated American air power on a scale that shattered the last illusions of Luftwaffe fighter pilots. The numbers defied comprehension. The scope overwhelmed every previous air operation of the war. On February 20th, Hauptmann Heinz Baer commanded IJG-1 at Rheine Airfield. German radar detected a large formation approaching from the west. The plots showed substantial numbers, but provided no hint of the armada actually approaching German airspace. Baer led his squadron into the morning sky, expecting another difficult but manageable interception. Climbing through 20,000 feet, he encountered something that defied tactical reality. 1,003 American heavy bombers filled the sky from horizon to horizon. 835 escort fighters weaved protective patterns above and beside the bomber stream. The formation stretched across 200 miles of airspace like an aerial invasion fleet. That night, Baer wrote in his diary with a trembling hand. The words captured the existential terror of facing American industrial supremacy in its full, terrifying glory. I have seen the end of Germany. The sky was dark with them. Our 12 fighters attacked a formation that stretched beyond sight. It was like 12 men attacking an army. We shot down perhaps 6 bombers. They barely noticed. The Americans launched 3,800 bomber sorties during Big Week. An additional 25-48 fighter sorties provided escort and support. They lost 226 bombers and 28 fighters during 6 days of continuous operations. These losses were replaced within 2 weeks of the operation's conclusion. Fresh aircraft, new crews, additional equipment. The American war machine absorbed the casualties like water soaking into sand. The Luftwaffe lost 262 fighters during Big Week. More catastrophically, they lost nearly 100 pilots killed in action. 14% of the total German fighter pilot force died in 6 days. These men could not be replaced. Their experience could not be replicated. Their knowledge died with them in burning aircraft scattered across the German countryside. Training schools starved of fuel, and instructors produced replacement pilots with less than 50 hours total flight time. Many had never fired their guns in practice. Some had never performed aerobatics. Others had practiced formation flying for mere hours before assignment to combat units. Oberst Hannes Trautloft served as inspector of day fighters during this period. His reports to the High Command painted a devastating picture of Luftwaffe pilot quality. The document survived the war in military archives. Its contents revealed the systematic destruction of German aerial combat capability. The average American pilot arrives in combat with over 200 hours flight time. This includes 75 hours in their specific aircraft type. They have practiced gunnery extensively. They understand formation tactics. They know their aircraft limitations and capabilities. Our new pilots have 40 hours total flight time, perhaps 10 hours in a fighter aircraft. They are not pilots. They are victims waiting to die. March 4, 1944, marked the beginning of the end for the Luftwaffe. On this date, American P-51 Mustang fighters appeared over Berlin for the first time in the war. The 4th Fighter Group's P-51Bs escorted bombers on the 1,100-mile round trip to the German capital. The psychological impact shattered German morale more effectively than any bomb. For 3 years, Luftwaffe pilots had enjoyed one tactical advantage. Allied escort fighters possessed limited range. German pilots learned to wait until escorts turned back at the limit of their fuel capacity. Then they attacked the unprotected bombers with relative safety. The P-51 Mustang destroyed this tactical advantage overnight. Major Gunther Rahl commanded the 3 Dwarfs G-11 and ranked as Germany's third highest scoring ace with 275 victories. He encountered Mustangs for the first time during the March 6 follow-up raid on Berlin. His combat reports survived in the Bundesarchiv. They revealed the technical superiority that made American fighters nearly unbeatable. The P-51 is faster than our Bf-109G at all altitudes. It turns better in combat maneuvering. It dives faster when pursuing or escaping. It carries unlimited ammunition compared to our 60 seconds of cannon fire. Most critically, it has the range to escort bombers anywhere in Germany. We have nothing to match it. The Mustang's Packard-built Merlin engine and laminar flow wing design gave it a range of 1,650 miles with drop tanks. Enough fuel to escort bombers to any target in the Reich and fight for 30 minutes over the objective. German pilots who had learned to wait for escort withdrawal now found themselves facing fresh American fighters over Prague, over Vienna, even over Warsaw, in distant Poland. Lieutenant Franz Stigler survived 487 combat missions during his wartime service. His experience spanned the entire evolution of aerial warfare from 1940 through 1945. A letter to his brother in March 1944 described the new reality facing German fighter pilots. The Mustangs wait above us like hawks circling prey. When we climb to attack the bombers, they dive on us with tremendous speed. Their velocity in the dive exceeds 500 miles per hour. By the time we evade their attack, the bombers have passed beyond our reach. If we pursue the bombers, the Mustangs destroy us from behind. It is systematic execution. By April 1944, the 8th Air Force routinely mounted 1,000 bomber raids with 800 fighter escorts. They did so repeatedly throughout the spring and summer. The mathematics of annihilation became simple and inexorable, numbers that spelled doom for any rational military planner. General der Jagdflieger Adolf Galland commanded Germany's entire fighter force. On April 27, 1944, he presented a report to Hitler that laid out the stark numerical reality. The document survived the war and captured German archives. Its contents revealed the hopelessness of Germany's aerial situation. American bomber production exceeds 3,000 aircraft monthly. American fighter production surpasses 4,000 monthly. American pilot training graduates 30,000 aircrew monthly. German fighter production averages 1,600 monthly, theoretical. Actual deliveries fall lower due to bombing damage. German pilot training produces 500 graduates monthly with inadequate preparation. German pilot losses exceed 400 monthly. Galland explained the situation to Hitler with mathematical precision. The enemy comes in waves. For every bomber we destroy, they send 3 replacements. For every fighter we shoot down, they send 5 more. We are not fighting an air force. We are fighting an airborne industry. Hitler's response, according to Galland's memoirs, was to scream about betrayal and cowardice. He ordered that any pilot who broke off an attack should be court-martialed for dereliction of duty. This insane directive required pilots to ram bombers if their ammunition was exhausted. The order transformed combat into suicide missions. It led to even higher losses among irreplaceable veteran pilots. Individual stories from this period revealed the psychological toll of fighting an unwinnable battle against overwhelming odds. Letters home, diary entries, combat reports, all painted the same picture of brave men facing impossible circumstances with dwindling hope. Hauptmann Robert Weiss commanded 3 JG-54 with 121 confirmed victories. P-51 Mustangs shot him down and killed him on December 29, 1944. His final letter to his wife, written the night before his death, survived the war. The words captured the despair of experienced pilots facing systematic annihilation. Each day, we have fewer aircraft and fewer pilots. The boys they send us from training schools can barely land their aircraft, much less fight experienced enemies. Yesterday, we had 6 aircraft serviceable to meet 800 bombers and 600 fighters. It is not war anymore. It is execution. Feldwebel Rudi Müller served as maintenance chief with JG-3 throughout 1944. His detailed diary recorded the progressive collapse of German fighter capabilities. Serviceability rates declined month by month as spare parts became scarce and fuel shortages limited test flights. January 1944, 67% of fighters serviceable for combat operations. March 1944, 45% serviceable due to lack of spare parts. May 1944, 31% serviceable. Fuel shortages prevent proper test flights after maintenance. July 1944, 18% serviceable. We lack everything necessary for proper aircraft maintenance. Müller described the desperate expedients required to keep any aircraft flying. We cannibalize 3 aircraft to keep 1 operational. The Americans lose 50 aircraft in a single raid and barely notice the loss. We lose 5 fighters, and the squadron becomes crippled for an entire week. Strategic bombing of German fuel production created cascading failures that multiplied American numerical advantages. By May 1944, attacks on synthetic oil plants reduced aviation fuel production from 18,000 tons to 2,000 tons monthly. This 90% reduction strangled Luftwaffe operations more effectively than direct attacks on aircraft factories. Oberst Hermann Graf commanded JG-11 during this fuel crisis. Germany's 9th highest-scoring ace, with 212 victories, he witnessed the progressive paralysis of his fighter force. His unit diary recorded the desperate measures required to conserve precious aviation fuel. Training flights canceled to save fuel for combat operations. Combat missions limited to 30 to 45 minutes maximum duration. Aircraft grounded with full ammunition loads but empty fuel tanks. Pilots prohibited from pursuing damaged bombers beyond German borders to conserve fuel for return flights. Graf's analysis of the tactical situation revealed German impotence in the face of American abundance. The Americans come with full fuel tanks and fight until their ammunition is completely exhausted before flying home to England. We take off with enough fuel for 1 pass at the bomber formations and a fighting withdrawal to our airfields. If we engage their escort fighters, we lack fuel to reach the bombers. If we attack the bombers, we lack fuel to evade their escorts. We are defeated before we even take off. Meanwhile, American forces consumed 20 million gallons of aviation fuel monthly in the European theater alone. This exceeded Germany's total petroleum production for all military and civilian purposes combined. June 6, 1944, D-Day provided the most stunning demonstration of American air supremacy over European battlefields. The Allied invasion of Normandy revealed German aerial weakness on a scale that shocked even pessimistic Luftwaffe commanders. The numbers told the story with mathematical brutality. Oberst Josef Priller led JG-26 as one of only 2 German fighter pilots to attack the invasion beaches on D-Day morning. He and his wingman Unteroffizier Heinz Wodarczyk made a single strafing run on Sword Beach before fleeing from dozens of Allied fighters that rose to meet them. Priller's mission report captured the futility of German resistance. Where is the Luftwaffe? Hitler had demanded repeatedly during the morning hours. The answer was devastating in its simplicity. The Luftwaffe had 319 serviceable fighters in France and Belgium to face 11,590 Allied aircraft of all types. The Americans alone launched 87-22 individual sorties on D-Day. The Luftwaffe managed exactly 319 sorties for the entire day. Oberleutnant Harold Quandt was stationed at Lille with JG-26 during the invasion. His diary entry for June 6 revealed the helplessness felt by German pilots who could only listen to radio reports of the massive Allied operation unfolding. We sat in our concrete shelters and listened to endless radio reports. Thousands of ships filled the channel. Thousands of aircraft darkened the sky. We had 7 serviceable fighters available for the entire day. 7 aircraft. Our squadron commander forbade us from taking off. It would be murder, he declared. Not combat. Simple murder. The introduction of the Messerschmitt Me-262 jet fighter in summer 1944 briefly offered hope to some Luftwaffe pilots. With a top speed of 540 miles per hour, the revolutionary aircraft flew 100 miles per hour faster than any Allied fighter. Its 430mm cannon could destroy any bomber with a single burst. Major Walter Nowotny commanded the world's first operational jet fighter unit, Commando Nowotny, in September 1944. Initially, he believed the Me-262 could restore German air superiority through technological supremacy. After 2 months of combat operations, he submitted a sobering assessment to Gallen's headquarters. The jets are revolutionary in concept, but too few and too late to affect the war's outcome. We have 30 operational Me-262s available. The Americans send 1,500 bombers and 800 fighters in a single day's operations. If we possessed 362 jets, we might make a meaningful difference. We will be fortunate to have 100 operational by year's end. Nowotny died on November 8, 1944, shot down by P-51 Mustangs while attempting to land his damaged Me-262. His final radio transmission became legendary among surviving jet pilots. "I'm burning. Hydraulics gone. Too many of them. Always too many." By war's end, Germany had produced 1,430 bientry Me-262 jet fighters. Only about 300 ever saw actual combat due to fuel shortages, pilot inexperience, mechanical problems, Allied bombing of jet fuel production facilities. The Americans produced 15,000 P-51 Mustangs during the same period. Surviving Luftwaffe aces provided invaluable testimony about the psychological impact of facing American industrial supremacy. Their memoirs and interviews revealed men who fought with incredible courage against impossible odds. Men who witnessed the systematic destruction of their air force through mathematical inevitability. General der Jagdflieger Adolf Galland summarized the experience in his post-war memoirs, The First and the Last. His words captured the essence of Germany's aerial defeat with stark clarity. By mid-1944, I knew the war was lost beyond any hope of recovery. It was no longer a question of superior tactics or individual courage or advanced technology. It became simple arithmetic that no amount of bravery could overcome. They could lose 100 aircraft in a single raid and replace them within 3 days. We lost 10 aircraft and never replaced them. Ever. Major Erich Hartmann achieved 352 aerial victories to become history's highest-scoring fighter ace. He fought exclusively on the Eastern Front until 1945, when he transferred west during the war's final months. His first encounter with American bomber formations left him psychologically shattered, despite years of combat experience. I had shot down dozens of Soviet aircraft in individual combat. But facing the Americans was completely different. They came in parade formations geometrically perfect, with hundreds of aircraft in precise alignment. Their defensive fire created walls of tracers visible from miles away. They maintained perfect formation while being attacked, while burning, while dying. It was not heroism in any traditional sense. It was industrial warfare, conducted with mechanical precision. Oberst Johannes Steenhoff flew 993 combat missions and scored 176 victories during his wartime service. He later served as Chief of Staff of the post-war Luftwaffe and NATO's Military Committee. His reflection on facing American air power provided unique insight into the German experience. We were skilled artisans fighting against an industrial machine of unimaginable capacity. Each German pilot required years of careful training. Each aircraft was hand-built by craftsmen who took pride in their work. The Americans mass-produced pilots and airplanes like Henry Ford manufactured automobiles. When we shot down a B-17, 10 more appeared to replace it. When they shot down a Bf-109, it was gone forever. The mathematics of industrial warfare made our defeat inevitable. By autumn 1944, the Luftwaffe was dying not from battle losses, but from systematic deprivation. No fuel, no experienced pilots, no spare parts, no hope of meaningful resistance against American numerical superiority. Major Heinz Baer ended the war with 220 confirmed victories. He commanded JG-1 during the final desperate year. His unit records revealed the progressive collapse of German fighter capabilities with bureaucratic precision. September 1944. We have 40 pilots assigned and 12 aircraft serviceable for operations. Yesterday we received 10 replacement pilots from training schools. Not one possesses more than 50 hours total flight time. 3 crashed during landing approach. 2 died in the wreckage. October 1944. Fuel allocation reduced by 75%. We can mount 1 combat mission every 3 days. American bombers come daily with perfect regularity. November 1944. We have received orders to ram enemy bombers if we exhaust our ammunition. This directive does not describe combat in any meaningful sense. It mandates suicide. The Japanese possess at least a warrior tradition that honors such sacrifice. We are being ordered to die for political lies. December 1944. The Americans came with 1,000 bombers today. We had 4 aircraft serviceable for operations. We did not take off. What would be the point of such futile gestures? January 1, 1945, brought Operation Bodenplatte, the Luftwaffe's final major offensive operation. The plan demonstrated the complete futility of fighting American industrial supremacy with inadequate resources and desperate measures. German commanders assembled every available fighter in Western Europe. Approximately 850 to 900 aircraft representing the last reserves of the once mighty Luftwaffe, the largest German air operation in over a year. They planned a surprise attack on Allied airfields, hoping to destroy aircraft on the ground where defensive firepower could not protect them. The operation achieved tactical success that made strategic failure even more bitter. German pilots destroyed 305 Allied aircraft, mostly caught on the ground during morning preparations. For a few hours, it seemed like the old days when Luftwaffe fighters dominated European skies. The Allied response revealed the hopelessness of German resistance. Operations continued without any pause whatsoever. Within 1 week, every destroyed aircraft had been replaced by new production from American factories. Additional aircraft arrived to strengthen existing units. The industrial machine simply absorbed the losses and continued grinding forward. The Luftwaffe lost 271 aircraft during Bodenplatte. More critically, they lost 143 pilots killed or missing, including 3 Geschwader Commodores and 5 Gruppe Commodores. These experienced leaders represented irreplaceable tactical knowledge accumulated through years of combat. Their deaths crippled German fighter effectiveness more than any material losses. Oberst Dietrich Peltz planned Operation Bodenplatte from his headquarters in western Germany. His post-war admission captured the operation's tragic irony with painful honesty. "We destroyed more Allied aircraft in one morning than during the previous 3 months of combat operations. It made absolutely no difference to the war's outcome. They replaced everything within days. We lost experienced pilots we could never replace under any circumstances. It was our death blow delivered by our own desperate hand." February 1945 brought final humiliation for the once proud Luftwaffe. German fighters could barely mount token resistance to 1,000 bomber raids that systematically destroyed remaining German cities. The aerial war had become completely one-sided, a massacre conducted with industrial efficiency against helpless victims. February 3, 1945, dawned gray and cold over German airfields. The morning briefings carried the same grim numbers. 1437 American heavy bombers approached, B-17s and B-24s in massive formations. 948 escort fighters surrounded them like protective steel clouds. The Luftwaffe scraped together 28 fighters, 28 aircraft to face nearly 1,500 bombers. The mathematics were brutal, simple, impossible. Lieutenant Walter Hagener strapped into his fighter that morning. His hands moved through familiar motions: parachute harness, radio check, oxygen mask. Each action felt mechanical, automatic, final. The takeoff was routine. The climb toward the bomber stream was not. Hagener later described what he saw approaching. A cloud filled the horizon ahead, except this cloud reflected sunlight like polished metal. This cloud hummed with the sound of thousands of engines. This cloud meant death. The escort fighters layered above the bombers in perfect formation. Hundreds of Mustangs, squadrons of Thunderbolts. They moved with practiced precision. No wasted motion. No hesitation. Professional killers protecting their charges. Hagener made one attack pass, cannons blazing for perhaps 3 seconds, then diving away desperately, praying the escorts hadn't seen him. He never knew if his shots hit anything. With so many bombers, it seemed pointless to wonder. The bomber formations stretched beyond vision. Box after box of flying fortresses. Each box contained 54 aircraft. Behind the first wave came another. Behind that came more. The sky turned aluminum silver with American aircraft. 23 German fighters died that day, shot down by escorts who barely noticed the combat. The Americans lost perhaps 6 aircraft. The arithmetic of destruction continued its relentless calculation. March 1945 brought intelligence reports that stunned Luftwaffe headquarters. American aircraft production for 1944 totaled 96,318 aircraft, nearly 100,000 military aircraft in a single year. The numbers seemed impossible, like reading science fiction. 35,000 were four-engine heavy bombers, more bombers than Germany had produced in all categories combined. 38,873 were fighters. Each month, the production numbers increased. The assembly lines accelerated, the factories expanded. German aircraft production for 1944 reached 39,877 total. All types included: transport aircraft, trainers, fighters, bombers. Everything combined barely reached 40,000, less than half of American output. Only 25,285 were German fighters. Most never flew operational missions. Fuel shortages grounded them. Pilot shortages left them without crews. Parts shortages kept them in hangars. Spare aircraft sat useless while American bombers darkened German skies. The fuel crisis hit hardest in autumn 1944. Allied bombing of synthetic fuel plants crippled production. Pilots trained on bicycles because no aviation fuel existed for flight training. Experienced aces sat idle, while bombers destroyed their homeland overhead. Major Wolfgang Falk commanded the night fighter force. His calculations revealed horrifying statistics. Americans had dropped 1.46 million tons of bombs on Germany, the explosive equivalent of 33 Hiroshima bombs. Each raid brought mathematical precision death. Bombing accuracy improved steadily throughout the war. New radar systems guided bombers to targets. Advanced navigation aids eliminated weather delays. Electronic computers calculated wind drift. Technology transformed bombing from guesswork into science. By March 1945, American bombers could place 90% of their bombs within 1,000 feet of target, from 25,000 feet altitude, in any weather, day or night. The Germans called it precision terror. Major Falk observed the transformation of warfare itself. The Americans had turned combat into mathematics. So many tons of bombs equaled so much destruction. So many fighters equaled air superiority. So many trained pilots equaled victory. Human courage became irrelevant against industrial calculation. The Luftwaffe was not defeated through combat. It was calculated out of existence, reduced to statistical insignificance, overwhelmed by production numbers that made resistance meaningless. April 1945 found the Luftwaffe existing only on organizational charts. Paper strength showed 1,500 fighters available for operations. Reality allowed perhaps 50 aircraft to fly on any given day, usually fewer, often none at all. Oberst Gordon Golob received appointment as commander of fighter defense in April 1945. His combat record showed 150 confirmed victories. His reputation as a fighter leader was legendary. His assignment was impossible. The new commander found empty fuel tanks throughout his command. No ammunition existed for aircraft weapons. Trained pilots had been killed or captured. Spare parts were non-existent. Operational airfields faced constant bombing attacks. Gordon Golob issued his first and last order as commander. Save the aircraft for museums. Save the pilots for their families. The war is over. Nothing remained but surrender. Captured Luftwaffe pilots provided extensive testimony after the war. Their words revealed the psychological impact of facing American industrial power. Numbers that crushed morale before combat began. Statistics that destroyed hope. General Lieutenant Joseph Schmid commanded Luftwaffe forces in the West. His testimony to the Strategic Bombing Survey was devastating. From 1943 onward, we fought not to win. We fought to delay inevitable defeat. Every pilot understood the mathematics. Each mission faced 10 to 1 odds minimum, often worse, sometimes 20 to 1. Bomber formations of 1,000 aircraft approached German airspace daily. Escort fighters outnumbered defending aircraft by massive margins. Combat became industrial slaughter. Major Georg Peter Eder scored 78 victories, including 36 heavy bombers. His thinking evolved throughout the war. In 1943, he believed superior tactics could stop the bombers. Early 1944 brought hopes for miracle weapons. Late 1944 required actual miracles. The Americans had transformed air warfare into assembly line production. German pilots fought against Boeing and Douglas and Lockheed and Republic and North American and Consolidated. They battled entire industrial corporations. Individual courage meant nothing against corporate production capacity. Production statistics revealed the impossible challenge facing Germany. American aircraft production, 1942 to 1945, totaled 300,000 aircraft. All types combined, the entire war production run. 35,000 four-engine heavy bombers rolled from American factories. 99,950 fighters of all models. 2.3 million aircraft engines to power them. 800,000 pilots received training, an endless conveyor belt of air power. German production for the same period reached 119,907 aircraft total. All types included. Only 194 four-engine bombers. The He-177 program mostly failed. 53,129 fighters total. Far fewer than American monthly output by war's end. German pilot training programs produced 28,000 aviators. Each received increasingly inadequate instruction as fuel and aircraft became scarce. Many died during training from accidents. Others reached combat units with minimal flying experience. Combat losses told the story of industrial supremacy. Americans lost 18,269 aircraft in European operations. Only 6.1% of total production. Acceptable losses easily replaced from factory output. Germany lost 57,000 aircraft in combat. 48% of total production. Irreplaceable losses that crippled remaining operations. Each aircraft destroyed was desperately needed elsewhere. American aircrew casualties totaled 94,565 killed, wounded, and missing, representing 11.8% of trained personnel. Tragic but manageable from training program output. German aircrew casualties reached 44,565 killed, wounded, captured. This represented 157% of trained personnel. Many pilots were shot down multiple times. The mathematics of survival favored nobody. By May 1945, the United States operated 41,163 military aircraft. Germany possessed fewer than 100 serviceable machines. The final ratio exceeded 400 to 1. Industrial democracy had achieved total victory. Luftwaffe pilots underwent profound psychological transformation during the war. They began as members of the world's premier air force. Victories from Spain to Poland to France proved German superiority. The early years brought confidence and pride. The transformation was complete by war's end. Pilots hid aircraft under trees, hoping to avoid detection. Fuel was hoarded for single missions. Maintenance became impossible without spare parts. Pride transformed into desperation. Hauptmann Franz von Vera became the only German pilot to escape Allied captivity and return to Germany. He was later killed in action over the Soviet Union. His 1941 report to Göring warned of American industrial capacity after witnessing it firsthand. The warnings were dismissed as defeatist propaganda. The Reichsmarschall accused von Vera of being corrupted by enemy contact. Göring could not conceive such industrial power existing. The truth exceeded imagination. Oberstleutnant Hans Ulrich Rudel flew 2,530 combat missions during the war. Most occurred on the Eastern Front against Soviet forces. He encountered American air power only in 1945. His observations were stark and revealing. The Soviets possessed quantity of aircraft and pilots. The Americans possessed quantity that functioned perfectly. Every bomber appeared pristine from factory production. Fighter aircraft showed immaculate maintenance. Paint gleamed. Engines ran smoothly. Equipment worked properly. American pilots appeared well-fed and well-rested and well-trained. German pilots were skeletal boys in patched aircraft with empty stomachs. The contrast was shocking. Industrial wealth versus industrial poverty. Major Heinz Nocke flew over 2,000 combat missions. He scored 33 confirmed victories against Allied aircraft. His detailed records tracked changing odds throughout the war. The mathematics of defeat became clear through statistics. 1943 brought bomber formations of 60 to 100 aircraft. Dangerous, but manageable with 20 to 30 German fighters. Combat was possible. Victory remained achievable through superior tactics and courage. Early 1944 saw formations of 200 to 300 bombers escorted by 100 fighters. German defenders needed everything available to make any impression. Resources became stretched beyond limits. Late 1944 brought 500 to 700 bombers protected by 400 escort fighters. German defenders watched helplessly with 12 serviceable aircraft. Intervention became impossible. Survival became the only goal. 1945 meant over 1,000 bombers escorted by 800 fighters. German pilots no longer attempted interception. They watched from the ground and waited for the war to end. Capitulation was mathematical certainty. Nocke's final diary entry dated May 7, 1945, provided the ultimate verdict. The Americans could have won with 1/10 of their actual strength. They sent everything to make a political point. The point was made clearly. Secret recordings of captured German officers revealed their true assessment of American power. British intelligence recorded conversations between high-ranking prisoners in May 1945. The transcripts were declassified decades later. General Oberst Hans-Jürgen Stumpf commanded Air Fleet Reich during the final battles. His recorded comments to fellow prisoners provided devastating analysis. Germany was not defeated by courage or superior skill. American pilots showed bravery equal to German aviators. Their flying skills matched expert German pilots in most categories. Germany was defeated by pure production capacity. Americans produced more aircraft monthly than Germany managed yearly. Pilot training exceeded German capability by enormous margins. Single bombing raids delivered more explosives than Germany dropped on England during the entire war. This represented industrial execution rather than traditional warfare. The American approach transformed their entire nation into aircraft factories. Women who previously manufactured washing machines now produced aircraft components. Men who built automobiles switched to bomber assembly. War became business conducted through spreadsheets and production quotas and efficiency metrics. Germans fought with warrior passion and traditional military values. Americans fought with accountant precision and industrial methodology. The accountants achieved total victory through mathematical superiority. Individual Luftwaffe pilots could identify specific moments when they recognized inevitable defeat. These revelations, collected from memoirs and interviews, and private letters, revealed psychological impact of facing overwhelming industrial power. Oberleutnant Oskar Busch of Jagdgeschwader II encountered a formation so large he counted from horizon to horizon. 7 complete combat boxes, each containing 54 bombers. Behind them came identical formations. This represented one of 3 separate raids that single day. Boesch landed and reported to his commander immediately. The war is over. We simply don't know it yet. Mathematics had reached final calculation. Resistance was meaningless against such numbers. Hauptmann Wilhelm Batz of Jagdgeschwader 52 experienced revelation in April 1944. His unit achieved their greatest single-day success. 11 B-17s shot down in one mission, their best performance ever recorded. The next morning, Americans returned with 50 more bombers than the previous day. German victory hadn't been noticed by American planners. Success was statistically insignificant against production replacement rates. Major Klaus Miatusch of Jagdgeschwader 26 watched a crippled B-17 continue flying in September 1944. 2 engines were completely destroyed, tail surfaces shot away. Formation integrity maintained despite massive damage. Gunners in the dying bomber killed 2 experienced German pilots during the attack. The wounded aircraft proved more dangerous than healthy German fighters. American engineering and crew training created lethal effectiveness even during destruction. American technological advancement accelerated throughout the war. Each new aircraft model surpassed its predecessor in performance. Meanwhile, German aircraft development stagnated due to resource limitations. The technological gap widened monthly. The B-17G, introduced in late 1943, featured multiple improvements. Bendix Chin turret mounted twin 50-caliber machine guns. Improved Norden bomb sight coupled with autopilot systems. Electronic superchargers provided consistent high-altitude performance. Radar navigation aids enabled all-weather operations. Chaff dispensers confused German radar systems. German fighters were increasingly simplified to accelerate production. Cockpit heating systems were deleted to save weight. Electric systems were replaced with manual alternatives. Substitute materials replaced aluminum as shortages worsened. Armor protection was reduced for weight savings. Radio equipment was eliminated from training aircraft. Oberleutnant Heinrich Erler scored 208 victories before his death in combat. His letters home described monthly deterioration of German capabilities. Each month, American aircraft improved, while German machines grew worse. Enemy additions included more guns, more armor, better engines, enhanced electronics. German modifications involved removing equipment, deleting systems, diluting fuel, eliminating radios, reducing armor. The technological trend moved backward, while Americans accelerated forward development. Progress versus regression defined the industrial competition. Pilot training comparisons revealed impossibility of German victory more clearly than any other statistic. Numbers demonstrated why defeat was mathematically certain, regardless of individual courage or skill. American pilot training by 1944 required over 200 hours total flight time before combat assignment. 75 hours minimum in operational aircraft types. 50 hours dedicated gunnery training. 40 hours formation flying practice. Unlimited fuel availability for instruction. No combat pressure during training programs. German pilot training by 1944 provided only 110 to 160 total hours. Previously, 450 hours were standard in 1941, 15 to 20 hours in operational aircraft, 5 hours maximum gunnery training, no formation flying instruction. Severe fuel restrictions limited all training. Training airfields faced constant bombing attacks. Oberst Hannes Trautloft commanded fighter pilot training programs. His December 1944 report was devastating. Germany was sending children to certain death. New pilots could not fly adequately, much less fight effectively. Formation flying was impossible. Gunnery skills were non-existent. Safe landing procedures were unknown. 10 new pilots assigned to combat units meant 8 deaths within 2 weeks. Training programs produced casualties rather than combat pilots. The system had collapsed completely under resource pressure. Luftwaffe morale disintegrated entirely by late 1944. Suicide rates among pilots increased 400% from previous levels. Desertion, previously unknown, became increasingly common. Some pilots deliberately damaged their own aircraft to avoid flying missions. Secret SS reports from the period documented the moral crisis throughout fighter units. SS Sturmbannführer Wilhelm Damberg reported in December 1944 that fighter pilots openly discussed inevitable defeat. Combat missions were called suicide flights by aircrew. Some pilots discharged ammunition over friendly territory and returned claiming successful combat. Morale could not be restored through propaganda campaigns or disciplinary punishment. Pilots had witnessed enemy strength firsthand. Reality destroyed official optimism. The Luftwaffe attempted increasingly desperate measures to maintain operations. Sturmgruppen were ordered to ram bombers directly. Raumjäger units were created specifically for suicide attacks. Court-martials for cowardice increased 800%. Families of pilots were threatened with concentration camps. Nothing worked effectively. Pilots had seen too much. Mathematics overwhelmed motivation. Industrial reality destroyed ideological fantasy. Production statistics killed military morale. March 18, 1945, brought ultimate humiliation to the Reich's air defenses. 129 American heavy bombers attacked Berlin in broad daylight. 733 escort fighters provided protection. The Luftwaffe launched 37 fighters to defend the capital city. Me-262 jets managed to shoot down 8 bombers through superior technology. Escort fighters destroyed 25 German aircraft, including 5 jets. Advanced German technology could not overcome numerical superiority. Adolf Galland flew an Me-262 with Jagdverband 44. This elite squadron comprised Germany's highest-scoring aces. Galland, Barkhorn, Hohagen, Krupinski, Lutzow had over 100 victories each. Combined, they had destroyed over 1,000 enemy aircraft. Together, they accomplished nothing against the bomber stream. Galland described the mission as futile from takeoff. They were insects attacking an avalanche. Individual expertise was meaningless against industrial mass production. April 1945 saw the effective end of Luftwaffe resistance. American bombers flew over Germany in bright aluminum finishes. No camouflage paint was necessary anymore. Straight-line approaches to targets eliminated evasive maneuvers. Fighter escorts were often cancelled as unnecessary precautions. 8th Air Force mission reports from April noted no enemy aircraft observed. No flak encountered at targets. Objectives destroyed without opposition. Aircrew reported missions resembled training flights over American ranges. Germany had stopped fighting back. Sortie rates throughout the war demonstrated the mathematical progression toward defeat. May 1940, during the Battle of France, saw 5,000 German sorties daily. Peak operations under ideal conditions with full resources available. August 1940, during the Battle of Britain, generated 3,000 sorties daily, still substantial numbers reflecting operational capability. Fuel and aircraft remained available for sustained combat operations. June 1944, on D-Day, produced only 319 sorties total. Dramatic reduction reflecting resource shortages. Allied air superiority was already mathematically established over occupied Europe. March 1945 allowed 50 to 100 sorties daily maximum. Token resistance against overwhelming Allied air power. Fuel shortages prevented larger-scale operations even when aircraft were theoretically available. May 1945 generated fewer than 10 sorties daily. Virtual elimination of organized resistance. The Luftwaffe had ceased meaningful operations against Allied forces. Post-surrender interviews with Luftwaffe personnel provided final assessment of American industrial supremacy. The Strategic Bombing Survey declassified testimonies in the 1960s. German officers provided devastating analysis of production warfare. General Feldmarschall Erhard Milch served as Inspector General of the Luftwaffe. His testimony acknowledged American industrial superiority. Intelligence reports indicated America produced 8,000 aircraft monthly by 1944. German officers couldn't believe such figures were possible. The intelligence was actually conservative. Americans were producing 9,000 aircraft monthly by peak production periods. How could any nation fight against such overwhelming industrial capacity? 2 months of American production exceeded 2 years of German output. General Oberst Hans-Jürgen Stumpf provided the final verdict on industrial warfare. Americans proved that modern war is won by workers rather than warriors. Every bomber over Germany represented thousands of workers in factories, mines, refineries. Germany fought against pilots. Actually, they fought Detroit, Pittsburgh, Seattle. Industrial cities produced the weapons that destroyed German resistance. Assembly line workers were more important than combat pilots. The final accounting revealed impossible mathematical challenges facing the Luftwaffe throughout the conflict. Heavy bomber production showed American superiority clearly. USA produced 35,000 four-engine bombers. Germany managed 1,194 four-engine aircraft. Ratio was 29-1. Fighter production demonstrated similar American advantages. USA manufactured 9,950 fighters from 1941 to 1945. Germany produced 53,129 fighters during the same period. Ratio was 1.9-1 in American favor. Pilot training hours reflected resource availability differences. USA averaged over 200 hours before combat assignment. Germany provided 110 to 160 hours by 1944. Ratio was 1.5-1 for American pilots. Fuel availability showed most dramatic difference. Americans had unlimited aviation fuel throughout the war. Germans had 10% of requirements by 1945. No meaningful ratio could be calculated. Peak sortie rates demonstrated operational capability gaps. Americans flew over 8,000 sorties daily by 1945. Germans managed 100 sorties daily, maximum by 1945. Ratio was 80-1 in American favor. Psychological impact on German pilots extended far beyond wartime service. Many suffered from what would later be recognized as post-traumatic stress disorder. The trauma was unique in military history. Dr. Hans Joachim Lehmann served as a Luftwaffe medical officer during the war. He became a psychiatrist afterward and studied veteran fighter pilots in the 1950s. Their trauma was different from typical combat stress. They suffered not from personal experiences, but from witnessing national impotence against American industrial power. They watched friends die fighting an enemy who barely noticed the losses inflicted. They experienced not defeat, but complete irrelevance. A reunion of former Luftwaffe fighter pilots occurred in Munich in 1962. Adolf Galland delivered the keynote address reflecting on lessons learned from facing American air power. Modern war proved that factories were more important than airfields. Assembly lines were more decisive than front lines. Workers proved more valuable than warriors. Industrial democracy could produce more than totalitarian efficiency could manage. America buried Germany under weight of production numbers, but Americans also demonstrated something more important. They rebuilt defeated nations after destroying them. They protected former enemies from Soviet expansion. They transformed enemies into allies through democratic example. American greatest victory was not producing 100,000 aircraft. Their greatest achievement was choosing to use that power for reconstruction rather than punishment. Industrial might was matched by political wisdom. April 26, 1985, marked the 40th anniversary of Germany's surrender. Johannes Steinhoff, former Luftwaffe ace and later NATO commander, spoke at the U.S. Air Force Academy. His address to American cadets provided final perspective on facing American air power. Young officers needed to understand what American air power meant to enemies. It meant watching horizons turn black with approaching bombers. It meant counting ammunition in seconds, while Americans counted theirs in hours. It meant watching the best pilots swept from skies in minutes. More importantly, it meant witnessing awesome power of democratic industrial might unleashed. Every B-17 over Germany testified to American workers, American resources, American determination. Germans counted aircraft in dozens. Americans counted thousands. Germans measured fuel in liters. Americans measured it in oceans. The lesson was not that America won through wealth alone. America could mobilize riches because it remained free throughout the conflict. Free workers outproduced slave labor consistently. Free enterprise outmanufactured state-controlled economies. Free citizens outfought zealous warriors through superior organization and resources. Steinhoff flew 993 combat missions and shot down 176 aircraft, and was shot down 12 times himself. But his most important mission was mental transformation from Nazi zealot to democratic citizen, from enemy to ally, from defeat to understanding. Young Americans needed to understand their ancestors didn't simply defeat Germany. They transformed it. They demonstrated that strength comes from production rather than conquest, from industry rather than ideology, from humanity rather than hatred. The bombing was destructive and terrible. The rebuilding was transformative and hopeful. Former enemies who once filled skies in combat now filled rooms as friends and allies. That represented America's true victory over fascism. The story of Luftwaffe recognition of defeat ultimately demonstrates industrial capacity, overwhelming military skill, merciless, undeniable mathematical industrial capacity. When Hauptmann Heinz Knocke observed those hundreds of B-17s over Schweinfurt, he witnessed more than enemy formation. He saw mathematical certainty of German defeat written in aluminum and steel. Each bomber represented 1.2 million rivets installed by American workers. Each engine contained 7,000 precisely machined components. Each crew member represented over 200 hours of training. Multiply these figures by 1,000 bomber raids, and the equation became mathematically unsolvable through military means. Luftwaffe aces were among history's finest fighter pilots. Many exceeded 100 victories. Some exceeded 200 victories. Erich Hartmann achieved 352 confirmed kills. But individual heroism could not overcome production statistics. Personal skill could not defeat industrial mathematics. Courage could not conquer assembly line output rates. Every Luftwaffe pilot who looked up at aluminum overcasts of American bombers understood the same truth. They were not fighting an air force in traditional terms. They were fighting an entire nation mobilized for industrial warfare. That nation could lose 100 bombers in a single day and launch 200 more the following morning. The war ended the moment American industry reached full production capacity. Luftwaffe pilots were simply first to recognize this reality. It was written across German skies in formations of flying fortresses stretching from horizon to horizon, an endless aluminum river flowing toward the Reich's heart. Those formations carried more than explosive bombs. They carried mathematical proof of Germany's inevitable defeat. Hundreds of American bombers demonstrated unlimited industrial capacity of a roused democracy. In that recognition lay both defeat and eventual redemption. Seeing American power meant witnessing American purpose, not conquest for territorial gain, liberation from totalitarian oppression, not vengeance against defeated enemies, reconstruction of democratic institutions, not hatred of German people, hope that enemies could become allies. The industrial verdict had been delivered through overwhelming production statistics. The Luftwaffe witnessed it firsthand through daily combat. In witnessing, they learned truths that would reshape the post-war world completely. Industrial democracy was the most powerful force on Earth. America was its arsenal and its example.